the CPA is here. Let's go, let's go. Yeah, yeah.
Backyard barbecue, what a treat to get together with these fine folks in Kettle Falls, Washington. It's definitely a family-owned business with wonderful, I'm gonna call it secret recipes that bring people from all over, from dessert to then what they are known for, which is their fabulous, fabulous barbecue, of course. I tell you what, they've gotten into some catering, so we're gonna be talking about that in future episodes. But I tell you what, here's what people want. Backyard barbecue for what they're known for, which is delicious food. But most importantly, I was so impressed with this family business. So here we go with backyard barbecue.
We need your help, JJ.
We've actually been able to, while we slowed down, to see a lot of it. We know our numbers. We know that we have a good business. We don't know how to make those numbers work for us. We like to take care of people before us, and that is killing us.
What I loved most about Stephen and Bernita was that their team kind of reminds me of you and I. And
absolutely.
Stephen, when he said, we know our numbers, we just need to figure out how to make our numbers work for us. And that is every small business owner's struggle. Every single one, including me, is, okay, I have all this activity, I have all these numbers, I have all these employees, money coming in, money coming out. Now, how do I make it work for me? Well, that's what we're gonna be working on with Backyard Barbecue.
Be the first to admit that I have fallen. I have definitely felt the sense of giving up, being scared, being fearful. A lot of that has to do with just having employees and wanting to take care of them, and having our business and needing for it to continue to remain, even with limited operation. Like, it needs to survive this. We're gonna keep saying, ride the storm. We're gonna ride the storm, just to get through it so that we can see the light, see better days. I know that this is gonna change things. Things are not going to ever be the same, but change is inevitable and growth is optional.
I get it. Owning your own business, it's scary. It's scary because it's not just about you anymore. You have employees, you have vendors, you have customers, you have clients. Like, it's just a domino effect, and everyone is affected, with you personally and everything. So I get it. I get it as a business owner myself. And also, you know, I've had businesses that were really successful and then they ended. So I get it. I know that it's scary, but I also know that, especially with Renita and Stephen and Backyard Barbecue, they have such an entrepreneurial spirit. And they are just digging in. They're doing everything that they can do to take care of their beautiful family, take care of their employees, take care of their customers. And I'm really excited about all this.
Well, I'll tell you what, she hit the nail on the head with everything that's going on, which is that change is inevitable.
Yeah.
And growth is optional. So the objective when I first visited with them was to kind of get to know them a little bit, talk about their business. And I always love talking with fellow business owners because you just hear the passion and why they do what they do, how they're going about it. And then of course we talked about kind of the struggles that COVID-19 has brought, especially to the restaurant industry. They have some exciting things going on. This is a highly sought after barbecue restaurant. And not only do they have a wonderful establishment in Kettle Falls, Washington, that people will drive even from Canada to go and eat at, or other states, They have got a booming catering business that's just been skyrocketing. And of course, with COVID, it's just been one cancellation on them after another because no one can have events. And in the state of Washington, things have even been extended further. And so what's neat here is that we're going to be addressing kind of two different aspects of the reopen, if you will, which is their restaurant, which is just classic barbecue restaurant, and can't wait to get up there, and then their catering business. But then they almost even have a third line, which is working the fairs, kind of a restaurant on wheels, truck, so to speak. And so a lot of exciting things to come. They're just like basically a business that's hunkered down and just raring, chomping at the bit, ready for the next step as soon as the state will let them get ready. So let's do a little more research into the industry just to get our hands around it a little bit. So I just jotted down some notes kind of in the restaurant world and industry. Look at this, $899 billion in sales projected in 2020. We've got 1 million plus restaurants in the USA, 15.6 million, that's employees. And then there's expected to be 1.6 million new employees in 2020. And then check this out, 8 in 10 owners started at the entry level, and then 9 in 10 restaurants have less than 50 employees. So that's 90%. And then 7 in 10 restaurants are single operations, right? So we're basically saying that these are one location, if you will. So, I mean, look at this, 90% less than 50 employees, 80% are owners that started at that entry level. 63% of consumers want to spend money on the experience, okay? 33% of restaurant owners do not spend on ads on social media. And then 23% of businesses that are in the restaurant industry, only 23% follow up on a bad experience, which is interesting there. And then 72% will pick food over price, meaning the consumer, they want the good food. And a couple other quick things. Order by smartphones was projected at 38 billion. Now going in post-COVID, we're looking at a $75 billion industry on the order by smartphones, maybe in the next year or so. And then 60% of consumers will pay more for takeout. And then check this out, 84% of consumers trust online reviews like they would trust their friends. So no one knows a business better than the business owner. And, so many times when I'm visiting with small business owners, they're like, well, the numbers better than I do. And I usually have to correct them to say, there's no way that's possible. I mean, even the clients I've been working with for, 20 plus years, they're in their business day in, day out. They know the vendors, the customers, the employees, the numbers are at their fingertips. I think sometimes they feel like, well, they don't understand the financials. But part of really getting your hands around the financials is just really taking a look at what the numbers are, what the averages are. And I like to break things down into percentages. So now let's do a quick look deeper into the barbecue industry. So I'm not sure where this came from, but they say 95% of Americans like barbecue. So that's a huge spectrum. Looking at 16,000 barbecue restaurants, but very few national brands. So lots of opportunity. And we've got 18 billion in sales, but remember, 899, okay, is the total for all restaurants, right? So we're talking 2% of sales are in the barbecue industry. And where is this going globally? There's lots of talk about other parts of the world loving this barbecue. Now, restaurants, a couple of quick other facts that offer catering, it's typically 18% of their sales. And then catering grew 50% faster than the restaurant industry itself. You know, financial statements, right? I mean, typically it comes down to 2 pieces of paper, and they're typically the overwhelming 2 pieces of paper for any business. But, you know, I talk about this in my book. In fact, you just really break it down on a balance sheet. It's pretty simple. It's your assets and your liabilities when you're looking at it. It's like, well, do you have $1,800,000 in your bank? No? Well, then you got a problem. Do you not have any assets? There's no assets listed. Do you have a problem? Because do you have any? Okay. So my point is the business owner is going to know, okay, are my assets look pretty much representative? And then on your liabilities, it's like, well, this says I don't owe anybody, but I know I have a loan here, here, and here. Well, then you know that your balance sheet needs to have some liabilities, because a balance sheet is really just a picture on that date. So on a balance sheet, that date is here's how much cash is in the bank on that date. Here's how many assets you have on that date. Here's how many receivables you have and payables and what you owe on that loan on that date. So on a balance sheet, it comes down to one date. So now let's flip over to an income statement. So the income statement is a period of time. Okay, typically that's going to be on a calendar basis, a quarterly or a monthly. And wherever the period ends on the income statement, then that would be the date that's on your balance sheet. So when you're in QuickBooks and you're looking at a balance sheet and it's as of April 30, then you would want an income statement that would be January 1 through April 30, assuming that we're talking calendar year. So that way, when you're matching them up, you know where you stand. So let's take a look at a P&L, an average in the restaurant industry. Of course, we start with gross income of 100%. In the restaurant industry, food, beverage, paper, 28%. The support staff and taxes, 19%. With management, payroll taxes, and its benefits at 10%. And then we've got rent, utilities, phone, internet, 10%. And then office supplies, postage, IT, miscellaneous, coming in at 5%. These are national averages, insurance, health, life, liability at 5%. And what I call the X factor, which is at 5% for various things, but that puts the total expenses at 82%, which then you're looking at a profitability on average nationwide of 18% for restaurants. The other aspect to be looking at with the P&L that's so important is the top line. You want to look at the bottom line, but you want to start with the top line because the top line determines everything else, right? And how does it determine everything else? Well, if you don't have enough coming up top, right, then you don't have enough going into the bank to then get paid out for everything that you need. And so there's really, there's basically 3 main components of an income statement. So what we just saw is basically running down the percentages, knowing that there's total expenses there of 82% with an 18% profitability, which is a national average for restaurants. And from the perspective of the categories, though, of course, we have our gross, but typically, let's say in the restaurant industry, the cost of goods sold would be the food. I would probably also include, though, with that, those wages, that labor. Now, you might break up the labor into different categories, but think of it this way. Your cost of goods sold is variable in the sense that, well, if you're not open and you're not selling, well, you're not paying anybody and you don't have any food cost. And then your fixed costs, okay, are basically your operating costs, are what expenses do you have regardless if you open or not. So when we're looking at the numbers there and we were walking through, you would really want to look at, okay, well, what's my gross profit? Because gross profit is what did you bring in minus your variable costs to then go, here's my gross profit to then pay for my overhead, my fixed costs to arrive at a profit. And so when you're looking at this, what's the top line, what's your variable costs, to then know what your gross profit is, to then know your fixed cost, to then arrive at the net income. And we'll talk in a future episode the importance to understand the difference between cash and accrual financials, because they're night and day. So on our first call, we went through a ton of numbers. We had a great discussion. I really think they had a good handle on it. We talked so long, it went from daylight to dusk to dark. And what's interesting is so many business owners, they don't trust their skills with QuickBooks. And what Vernita says,
19 done, I'm like scared to go in. I try to go in and reconcile, like, and help, and called Steven in, and he's helping pull up videos.
so when they first sent me their numbers, I was already excited, because anytime I get financial statements, like real financial statements, like I was talking about earlier, I know that I'm working with a business owner that does truly know their numbers. Because if we're going to do any kind of analysis, if we don't have good numbers, the analysis is going to mean nothing. So one of the things that I did, because when I'm trying to really kind of ferret down and you're just looking at naked numbers, sometimes that doesn't really speak to you. What can speak to you, though, is finding a benchmark, like I've done on a national level in the restaurant arena, and then took their numbers and compared it for the last 2 years. And you have to know that when you're looking at benchmarks and on a national level, it's just that. And it's just a starting point. And it shows things that probably everybody knew, but now we get to see how does it compare in a graph format, percentage format, and then how does it progress, so that as we're moving forward, we get to see what is the trend. And it helps, I think, right here, knowing what the plan of attack is, and then looking at it from this perspective just puts it all in more of just a comprehensive manner. Well, let's do a little bit more homework here. So this is the restaurant average costs, and this is what we had just looked at. So it's taking that 82% and breaking it up into the categories to where we now have a pie chart just of the expenses. Now in the restaurant industry, you can see that the biggest portion is going to be wages, and then the second being the food. So when we're looking and working with a client, what we want to look at is how does that compare to the client? Now you got to remember, this is a national average, which in a lot of ways is just that. It's just a benchmark. And so when we're looking at 2018, it just allows us to know that, okay, we need to work on a little bit of the food cost and the amount that's going to wages. But then take a look at 19, you're able to see some progress here where the amount for food, beverage, and paper went down dramatically, which we'll talk about later, as there was kind of one thing that was discovered that was having a great effect. And so then when you take a look at 2019 versus the average nationwide, you start to see that in 19, the food costs started to come down under control. The wages still need to be looked at. And this is just the biggest issue with every small business, is the payroll cost. So let's just take a quick look. So we've got the national average, and then we've got 18, and we've got 19. And now we just know this is really looking good. We've got a good trend going here. And now we just want to go into a little bit more of a deep dive as we see the trend, and then continue that into 2020.
All right, you guys, let's bring JJ over into this, because honestly, JJ, he's been the one that's did all of the analysis. He's done all the homework. He's done all the research, rolled up his sleeves, put on the suit jacket, pulled out the cigar, had the Johnny Walker Blue. It's all been JJ. Numbers on the tin key and all. So really, this part is really for JJ, the most important part.
Well, I'm just excited to be working with him. I think I've said it several times. really the next step is getting into their numbers. I had a second conversation with Steven talking about an exciting part of their business as they come out of COVID-19 of just, skyrocketing with already the success they've had in one aspect of backyard barbecue. But yeah, I was thinking that I'd probably spend an hour in the first call and maybe a couple 30-minute calls, but I've really gotten into it. And I think probably altogether, just where we're at, we haven't even gotten up there yet.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll probably spend a total of a full day, but
Yeah.
I'm loving it. And, with them, as Steven said in the beginning, they know their numbers. It's just, how do we get those numbers to work for them? So definitely rolling up the sleeves even more in our next episode to come.
That's right, because don't forget, Backyard Barbecue says they just cook. They don't do the books.
I love it. And so I'm going to walk you through in this episode how we came up with all this, because when we're talking numbers, got to take note.
Cause money never sleeps. You never met a CPA quite like me. Nah. You never met a CPA